Hello, and welcome to the 10th episode of Season 10 of the Dark Money Files, in which we shine a light into a murky world. I am Ray Blake, and with me is my co-host, friend and business partner, Graham Barrow. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Ray. 10 of 10. Wow.
Yeah, some sort of numerological significance, perhaps, and that's not terribly off topic from what we're looking at today, is it?
Well, no, and I'm quite impressed by the way you got numerological out.
Yeah, well, indeed.
Not easy. Yeah.
No. Not something you do every day without a bit of a run-up, is it?
Absolutely.
Now, Graham, keeping track on investors across multiple global jurisdictions and maintaining accurate real-time records is no mean feat. And it's why so many unscrupulous individuals can get away with all the shenanigans we cover in the podcast. And this is a massive concern for fund managers who do their best to sift the chaff from the wheat. Well, rather it was.
Yes, because with Cure, K-U-R-E, a new product by Deep Pool, fund managers can enjoy a single global investor record updated with consolidated data from anywhere in the world as and when. And this one system handles every facet of the entire customer life cycle. If I was a really talented fund manager, if only, this is the product I would use, and many of the best already do. So find out exactly how it works at deep-pool.com.
We're looking today, Graham, at the subject of plausibility, which we touch on so often, but at the same time feels like quite a nebulous concept, doesn't it?
Well, it does, Ray, but fortunately we have a selection of thinkers, both ancient and modern, that can help us to get a handle on it.
We certainly do. So let's start with something that at first glance is a little bit off topic. How would you react if I told you I'd seen an unidentified flying object, Graham?
I wouldn't react at all, Ray. It happens to me all the time. I went for a walk earlier and I saw several, as I do most days.
It's a very common experience, isn't it?
Well, it is, but I suspect that a certain portion of our listenership is getting a bit cross with us now and wondering how we could be so credulous.
Yeah, and you're right, of course, but they're not reacting to what we said, but rather their interpretation of what we said. We didn't claim to have seen an alien spacecraft or creatures from the ninth dimension, did we?
No, we didn't. We specifically spoke about flying objects that were unidentified. We didn't know what they were or hadn't cared to take a second look. They could have been planes or crisp packets blown in the wind. Anything at all.
And I dare say they were. Did you know that the noted science and science fiction writer Isaac Asimov used to get into all sorts of trouble on this point? All the ufologists, as they called themselves, would invite him to their conferences where he would talk about flying saucers and refused to use the term UFO. It made everyone really cross.
Ufologists, I love that.
That's good, isn't it?
Yeah. So I've read that when they challenged him on it, he'd say he'd be delighted to talk about unidentified flying objects, but that they seemed already to have identified those objects and were clearly talking about something other than flying objects that were unidentified.
And what do we take from this, Graham?
Nobody likes a pedant, Ray. As you and I have discovered throughout our life.
Yeah. Well, there's that. Our mothers love us. Carl Sagan was another critic of the flying saucer lobby, of course. He's on record as saying extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
And I think these two modern scientific thinkers give us a great way into the topic of plausibility, actually, Ray.
Yeah, I think they do. Perhaps we should start by looking at some aspects of our work where we have to have regard to plausibility.
And for me, there's a great one that comes out of the Wolfsburg Guidance on Source of Wealth that we looked at when it came out a couple of years ago.
Remind me of the particular bit, Graham.
Well, the first bit is this, and I'm quoting, "Consideration should be given as to whether the customer's source of wealth appears legitimate and the collected information is plausible, brackets, i.e. the information provided by the customer is reasonable, close brackets, with regard to the customer's overall wealth and other information that's been collected about the customer.
That's interesting. Wolfsburg seems to be defining plausible as reasonable. I'm not sure that takes us much further forward, does it?
Well, perhaps not, Ray, but hold that thought for a minute, because I think their next paragraph will resonate with you.
Okay, what's that?
Quote again. While some gaps in the chronology of wealth accumulation over time are not uncommon, any significant gaps and or material inconsistencies may present challenges to determining plausibility. In such cases, an FI may consider seeking further clarification from the customer, for example, by requesting additional documentation or conducting independent inquiries.
And that's Carl Sagan's point right there, isn't it? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary, or at least, I suppose, greater evidence.
And that's exactly how I read it. And this ties in with the thoughts and teachings of a much earlier thinker.
Ah, yes. Now, this will be William of Ockam, will it?
The very man, Ray, celebrated these days in the principle of Ockham's razor.
Now, where is Ockam, I wonder?
Well, it's in Surrey, Ray, not actually very far from where I was born, part of what is now the borough of Guildford.
Oh, nice area.
Yeah, not like where I was born. Yes. Well, it was slightly less such a nice area, I imagine, in 1287 when William was born there. As soon as he could, he was away out of there off to Oxford to study theology. Thence ensued a career, yes, in theological, political and philosophical writing.
Now, this, of course, was at a time when science and religion went hand in hand, wasn't it? And often what was held up as scientific actually was founded on a matter of scripture or faith.
Yes, but here William, and I think we'll at this point just call him Ockam, like the rest of the world, was a bit of a modernist. He said that whilst the ways of God were not open to reason, God was the only ontological necessity and science was a matter of discovery.
In other words, take God as a given, but rely only on logic and reason to build a view of science and how the world and everything else works.
Yes, and a few hundred years later, he'd probably have been excommunicated or burnt at the stake for that view. But the 1300s were a relatively tolerant age.
And today, we remember him for his shaving habits.
Oh, as you know, Ray, the razor is a metaphorical one.
Well, yes, so it is. Talk us through the principle, first as Ockam stated it, and then as we currently interpret it.
Okay, so if you'd like me to do that, Ockham's version is said to have been entia non sunt multiplicanda praeter necessitatem.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Or in English?
Entities must not be multiplied beyond necessity.
Well, I mean, that probably made complete sense to a contemporary crowd, but I'm not sure he communicates as well to a modern audience, Graham.
Or even just an audience. No, perhaps not. Bertrand Russell had a go at explaining it on what were then modern terms about 100 years ago. He said, I'm quoting again, if one can explain a phenomenon without assuming this or that hypothetical entity, there is no grounds for assuming it. This implies that one should always opt for an explanation in terms of the fewest possible causes, factors, or variables.
And these days, the principle tends to be voiced as the simplest explanation is usually the right one. But I can't help feeling this oversimplifies and loses some important nuance.
Undoubtedly, Ray, but it's not a bad working approximation.
And I think we'd argue that Ockham's razor is really at the heart of a plausibility test, isn't it?
Oh, I think it is, Ray. I'll give you an example. We're in the middle of the English countryside taking a walk. I mean, we're not, but this is hypothetical.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of the English countryside taking a walk, and in the distance we both hear the distinctive beat of hooves on the ground. Something, currently out of sight, is galloping towards us.
Horses, Graham?
Not zebras, Ray.
Well, I mean, it could be, I suppose, but it seems very unlikely.
Exactly, and there is Ockham's razor in action. When we hear distant hoofbeats, we should assume horses, rather than zebras here in the UK, are approaching.
But it could be zebras, Graham. It's possible.
Yes, it is, but unless and until we gain access to more or better evidence that makes us reevaluate,
You mean like zebras coming into view?
like zebras coming into view, exactly, we should assume the most likely explanation.
Now, isn't most likely a bit subjective, Graham?
Well, it might be sometimes, yes. So if that's a concern, you should work out what the assumptions are that you're making and replace them with facts.
So our assumption out in that field is that there are more native horses in England than zebras. Are we making any others?
Yes, we're assuming that there are no nearby zoos that zebras might have escaped from, or they're maybe running them out for exercise for the day. And we're also assuming that there's nothing else that makes a sound that could be mistaken for distant hoofbeats.
To be honest, I'm quite relaxed about those assumptions.
Well, so am I, Ray, but I might feel different if I was, say, very close to Whipsnade Zoo or Chester Zoo, and I might be moved to check with that nearby zoo on the phone if I wanted to close out that possibility.
Well, I think that's very thorough of you.
I used to work in compliance, Ray.
Yeah, point taken.
So let's bring this back to the workplace and look at an example that lets us use this principle.
OK, but now, look, before we do, Graham, can I split the example into two elements?
Well, of course you can, Ray.
I want to talk about the proposition and the context.
Oh, that sounds a nicely structured way forward, Ray. Do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, so before we go into the compliance example, let's talk in general terms just for a further minute. Let's talk about winning the lottery.
And that's all I'm ever going to do, Ray.
I beg your pardon?
Talk about winning the lottery. I'm never going to actually win it because I don't actually ever buy any tickets.
OK, fair enough. And me neither, for the record. But you understand how it works.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And that's why I'd never buy any tickets.
OK, right. So our first proposition is that one of my numbers will come up in the lottery this week. Is that plausible?
Well, it's hard to say, Ray.
Why is that?
Because you haven't given me the context of how many numbers are used in the lottery in question and how many are you allowed to select.
Exactly. Let's start off by supposing there are 10 numbers in the lottery and you can choose 6.
Well, in that case, I'd say it isn't just plausible, I'd say it's extremely probable.
And if you could still choose 6, but there were 51 numbers in the lottery?
Well, then the chances of your one number coming up are much less likely. I think they're about 1 in 9, but it is still possible.
And that's an interesting choice of words, Graham. Plausibility could be said to be a point on the spectrum that starts at certain, moves through probable to possible, and finally impossible.
Yeah, and I suppose specifically it exists between probable and possible.
Exactly. But, and here's the rub, you can't place it in a manner that's deterministic.
So it's not something you can calculate?
No.
Okay, so shall we move to a compliance example?
Yeah, let's do that.
Well, shall we start with an easy one, Ray? ID and V.
Identification and verification. That sounds like a good idea. What were you thinking of specifically?
I was thinking of evidence of your main residence.
Now I think I know where you might be going with this, but do carry on.
Well, thank you. So let's say you're onboarding a notable PEP. She sends you a notarised copy of her passport and a utility bill for her main residence in London for the quarter starting in December and ending in February.
OK. Any issues with these pieces of evidence?
Well, the passport checks out fine. The notary is a well-known London solicitor, and that leaves no room whatsoever for doubt.
And the utility bill?
Well, that's for her 7-bedroom mansion in Hampstead, and it totals £104.62.
Now, OK. Now that seems ridiculously cheap for a 7-bedroom mansion in Hampstead for the cold winter months in London.
Exactly. On the surface, that seems implausible.
But have we qualified the proposition or checked the context?
And the answer to that question, Ray, is a resounding no. She was just asked to provide a utility bill.
So there could be a range of probabilities as to why it seems implausible.
There could. She might, for example, have a 100-metre tall wind turbine in her very large back garden.
Not in Hampstead, she won't, Graham. There's there's no way they'd allow a dirty, great big wind turbine in her back garden. That's just not plausible.
And I agree. She might, of course, have covered every inch of her roof with solar panels.
Which is very easy to check on a satellite view.
Exactly, and it turns out there is not a solar panel in sight.
She might have a ground source heat pump.
Now, that is a bit more plausible, but I still think a little over £100 for 3 months is stretching that particular likelihood.
So where do we go from here then?
We check the proposition. Ask her about the very small bill.
I see. And the response?
The response is that while she regards the house in London as her main residence, she doesn't like the cold, so she shuts it down for the winter, all but for a bit of background heating, which is supplied by her ground source heat pump, which is very economical to use, and she and all of her staff decamp to her other home in Monaco.
Which sounds entirely plausible to me, and quite lovely, in fact.
Well, yes, it does, doesn't it? So now you have to decide whether there is anything to be gained by going through the same process again with the Monaco house, or accept that you have properly established your client's bona fides and move on.
And I know which one I think.
Yeah, me too.
Any other examples, Graham?
We've already mentioned source of wealth, Ray, but if you think about it in terms of proposition and context, I think it becomes much more straightforward.
Yeah, the proposition, helpfully, is always the same. From where did your total wealth originate?
But the context is always going to be different.
Indeed. Most very wealthy people already have a public persona which allows some inferences to be drawn.
Exactly. So someone exhibiting significant wealth, which appears to have arisen fully formed without any prior notability or fame or whatever, will need some explaining.
Whereas someone starting a record company, say, on a wish and a prayer, having the great good fortune to sign someone who then produces one of the best-selling albums of the late 20th century out of nowhere at all, and then using the revenue generated by that album alongside a gift for garnering publicity to incrementally grow your business. A business which, by the way, has managed to purloin a particularly memorable name into a global conglomerate is easy to demonstrate on a due diligence file.
Well, I think I might know who you're referring to there, Ray.
Madonna, Mary.
I am not going there, Ray.
Probably wise. You'd only get yourself in a bit of a pickle. Bit of an English reference, that one. So I think that gives us a decent grounding in the principle of plausibility, which really ought to run through any due diligence process.
Yes, because if it doesn't, what we're doing is hard to distinguish from just collecting information for no good reason. And there is an unfortunate tendency sometimes to do just that.
But Graham, we ought to talk about some of the mental gymnastics that we sometimes see when people, for whatever reason, try to squeeze the most bizarre fact pattern into something that might just be plausible.
I can think of situations where that happens a lot, right? And one of them is in transaction monitoring, and I can understand why that happens.
Yeah, I mean, if all you do all day is try to determine why each alert in your stack is a false positive, because almost all of them tend to be, then you might end up requiring extraordinary evidence that a given alert isn't a false alarm. You might look for the most tortured and arcane justification for something which a reasonable person would be fairly sure was illicit.
And again, we have seen that happen.
I guess another one is some of the weird filings you've spotted at Companies House.
Oh, yes, Ray. Some of those require you to believe the most extraordinary sequence of coincidences might produce something that looks completely criminal, but somehow it isn't.
Can you think of a succinct example?
Well, yes, I can. Not so long ago, about a dozen companies were registered by a group of septuagenarians to the same block of flats in southeast London.
Over what time period?
All on the same day, right?
Okay, so 12 companies on the same day to the same block of flats, all by people in their 70s.
Yep, and somebody genuinely put forward the theory that it was sheltered housing and they had all decided to start businesses on the same day.
Really?
Yep, and I suppose there is a world somewhere in the universe that might happen given an unlimited supply of worlds.
And universes, I believe the current thinking suggests.
Right.
What happened to our septuagenarians?
Well, over the next few weeks, virtually every apartment block in the same postcode was targeted, and it was always septuagenarians or above who were made the directors.
And whilst coincidences do happen, whole strings of them are vanishingly rare, aren't they?
They are. The probability of multiple coincidences in a fact pattern requires you to multiply the probabilities together, which is why choosing one UK lottery number isn't all that unlikely, 1 in 9 as we saw earlier, but choosing all 6 is something around 1 in 14 million.
It certainly is. Don't do it, kids. So, that's plausibility. What's next, Graham?
Well, let's wait and see what news the next week has to bring, and then we can decide, shall we?
Now, that's cryptic, and I suspect it goes beyond mere speculation. I'm looking forward to it.